Hello and welcome back to Toy Thursday with Johnny Tiger on August 19, 2021. I imagine that is not a very pleasant sight to open the video with scary giant spider. I hate spider. But we are continuing our fantasy series, and as some of you have remembered, we did some Lord of the Ring characters before. In fact, those of you who's watched the past episode might recognize this horrific spider monster as Shelob from Lord of the Ring, the giant demonic monster spider that tried to kill Frodo in near the end of his journey. So, are we doing Lord of the Ring again? Not quite. But this monster does make a very good transition into our subject for today. Let me bring you back to 2001, I believe. I was just finished cooking dinner and about to sit down and eat. It was a long day. I had a lot of classes to tend to, and I had to eat dinner and uh, then would be sitting down doing some studying. But as I was sitting there, I had the radio on. I don't even remember which station it was, and they were doing this little sample of an audio book. Now I came into the book from the like middle of the reading, so I had no idea what I was even listening to. I was just listening the audiobook while uh, uh, preparing myself to eat dinner. And I remember thinking, what book is this? I don't recognize this book. And the part that was going on when I tuned into the radio station was this kid who was running for some reason in the dark forest full of magical creature, and then, long story short, he got himself uh, cornered by a giant monstrous spider that was named Aragog. And I thought, wow, you know, I wonder what book this is. This is kind of interesting, giant monster spider, a forest full of magical creatures. Now, those of you who are in the geekdom or who are a connoisseur of Harry Potter would immediately already recognize I'm talking about Harry Potter. But at that moment, I didn't know what I was listening to. I only found out at the end of the story sample that they played on the radio. It said, "This is you've been listening to a sample from Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, yada yada yada, and so on and so on. Please purchase the official release." And I was kind of hooked. I was kind of hooked. I was intrigued, and so I guess the the gimmick worked for the radio station. Next day, I went online and purchased the available Harry Potter audiobook and listened to it from beginning to end. I read every single Harry Potter book from the first to the last. I have not watched the movies, however, uh, mainly because I wanted to preserve what little bit I enjoyed of the books. Overall, I will say that Harry Potter has been very well written, but it is not really for me. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it somewhere from book one to book four, when there was a lot of uncertainty and new magical creatures being discovered and new histories of the wizard world being discovered. But once the book started to get all political and adult and dark and sinister and the good versus evil and a lot of the backstabbing and stuff like that going on, I stopped enjoying it. And that is really strange. And usually that's the kind of stuff I like. Usually, I don't like kids' book. I don't like a young adult fantasy. For me, a good fantasy have to have swords and people fighting to the death and killing dragons and tantalizing mentions of encounters with voluptuous maidens and a great heroic. Those are, to me, a mark of good fantasy that I like. So why is it that Harry Potter, when it finally started to get serious and adult, I stopped liking it? Maybe because it was not adult enough. You see, for me, when I was reading the first four books, even though they were oriented to children, they were very tame compared to most of my reading materials. I knew what to expect. I knew I was reading a young adult fantasy, so I could put myself in that child's mentality. I could put myself in a kid's world and still enjoy the book from a very innocent point of view. But when you started to get all dark and gritty, I could no longer look at it from, oh, this is really fun. This is really cool. I wish my childhood was like this. I wish, I could no longer put myself in that perspective. So I snapped back into my adult mind, the part of me that liked mayhem and battles and lustful adventures. And I find that while the book had gotten dark and adult and mature, it was just not mature enough. Like this nonsense about all these uh, killing, uh, uh, destruction, magic, and only bad guys can use them. Good guys are not allowed to use them. And then bad guys can break all the rules, and good guys have to play by the like that. To me is silly. That to me doesn't make sense when Batman does it. It doesn't make sense when Superman does it. It doesn't make sense when Harry Potter does it either. So I lost my love for the series uh, from that point on. I mainly just read through it, follow it all the way to the end because, well, I already read four books. I might as well follow it through. Now, we transition from Lord of the Ring into Harry Potter using this giant spider. In Lord of the Ring, the giant spider is called Shelob, and in Harry Potter, the giant spider is called Aragog. There was actually an Aragog action figure produced in the 2001, 2002. Unfortunately, I never acquired him, so we have to use Shelob for a stand-in. However, I do have, even though very, very few, I do have a couple of Harry Potter characters that I will show you guys today. Unfortunately, they are very, very far removed from the cream of the crop or the top of my collection. Uh, both of these characters were poorly executed, in my opinion, but we'll talk about them when we bring them in. I didn't even realize that the spider has fallen off the counter until I went to move her. So I'm not sure at which point she fell off. Hopefully, you guys at least got a glimpse of her because I was talking so much about spiders in the first little bit. Anyway, now I imagine if I don't tell you, you guys wouldn't know who this guy is. Even those of you who know the book, you might not know who this character is supposed to be. This is Draco Malfoy. Draco Malfoy, one of the primary antagonists, bullies who like to torture, torment, bully, and generally uh, be the chief rival to Harry Potter in his first few years in the school for wizards. Draco Malfoy here was made by Mattel in, I believe, around 2001, and Mattel did a whole line of Harry Potter action figures, including some monsters and magical creatures. Now, unfortunately, I've never had great love for Mattel action figures until recently that they cranked out some good-looking Jurassic World dinosaurs. But prior to that, Mattel has always like when I hear Mattel, I'm like, oh, okay, not getting it. And there's good reason for that. Mattel is just known for making some awful action figures. They should just stick to making Barbies. Anyway, um, and very unfortunately, my first exposure to Mattel's Harry Potter action figure was Draco Malfoy, and that caused me to uh, didn't want to spend money on the rest of the characters from Harry Potter, just because how poorly Draco Malfoy was made. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. Why I think he's such a bad action figure. First, let's say this is strictly my opinion that Harry Potter does not lend itself to good action figures. Why? Because most of the characters, at least human characters in Harry Potter, dress the same way. Most of the characters they wear wizard robe, that they got a wizard wand as weapon, and that's about it. Like, you might be able to think of some creative accessories for them here and there, but for the most part, the characters dress the same way, in robes and wielding wands. That make Unless you're building a specifically Harry Potter display, that makes them just kind of boring. You know, especially for someone like myself who rely on tactile differences to enjoy and appreciate my action figures. If you hand me Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy and then Ron Weasley and any other of the children uh, young wizard as an action figure, they will all start to feel the same because they are just not that different. They might have different colored robes, they might have different medallions on them, but overall, it's just a young child in a wizard robe holding a wand in his hand. So overall, the line does not lend itself to very good human characters. It does have the potential to give you some interesting creatures and monsters. It has trolls and werewolves and hippogriffs, which we'll see in a little while. It has a dragon and a lot of other evil creatures. So I imagine a company can actually do really well just capitalizing on the monsters and creatures from the series. But as far as human characters go, unless you're a hardcore Harry Potter fan, it's just not very exciting overall. And that is one of the downfalls of Draco Malfoy here. As you can see, he is clad in his wizard robe. He is very small. He is about 5 inches tall, but that's okay because he's a child. He's a child. I mean, at this point in the story, maybe he's like a teenager. Um, but because he's clad in his robe, there's not a lot you can do with him because the robe is like, even though it's soft and rubbery, uh, he doesn't have the articulation to make things work. His head can turn from side to side. His shoulder, his arms can move up and down. His wrist can turn, but there's no elbow articulation whatsoever, and the arm cannot move out to the side, which means he's limited to holding his arm forward, lifting his arm up in surrender, putting his arm down. That's it. That's it. No, there's not much you can do with this action figure. And leg is even more of a joke because it's blocked by the robe, and there's some kind of hip joint, but it's a V crotch joint. So when you kick his leg forward, he's going to spread his leg. Just look really weird. So the whole action figure, even though he has about 10 points of articulation, there's just not much you can do with him, which is a shame because with a little bit of with an elbow joint, with a ball and socket shoulder joints that allow his arm to go out to the side, he could be a lot more dynamic. So why did I pick Draco Malfoy as my first character from Harry Potter to own as an action figure? Did I like Draco Malfoy? No. Draco Malfoy is like a bully and a coward and just not a very likable character. Uh, I I I didn't like him as a character. Uh, but why did I pick him? Well, when I saw Harry Potter action figures being produced by Mattel, I immediately kind of knew that I might not like them. So I didn't want to get someone recognizable. I didn't want to get someone like Harry Potter. Because if I get Harry Potter, then I need Harry Potter's friends. And if I have Harry Potter and his friends, I need someone for them to fight. Which means I'm going to feel obligated to buy more, even if I didn't like the action figure. So I wanted someone obscure enough that it's not too weird to see him on the shelf standing alongside uh, characters from other properties. And that makes Draco Malfoy quite a good choice. He is a young teenager in a wizard's robe with a wand in his hand, and uh, he is not an instantly recognizable character, uh, and he is kind of evil or mean or snarky looking. So even if I ended up deciding not collecting Harry Potter from Mattel, which I did make that decision. I didn't want any more of them. Uh, but Draco Malfoy would still stand in really good as a young sidekick or evil young henchman uh, for some Dark Lord or Dark Wizard from other properties. Right now, I have him standing on the shelf with a whole bunch of evil wizards and necromancers from World of Warcraft and EverQuest and other properties, and he fits in just fine. And most people wouldn't really know him enough to say, hey, how come you have Draco Malfoy and no other Harry Potter? So that is the method behind my madness. Now, this was made in 2001, so we can say, well, okay, maybe 2001, and it was Mattel, and so we already expect it to not be so good, and uh, action figure technology wasn't very good in 2001. So maybe all that can be forgiven, excused. Not so much. About a couple years ago, my favorite action figure maker of all time, Todd McFarlane, took over the Harry Potter license. And there was rejoicing on my part because I was thinking, yeah, you know, Todd McFarlane, it can't go wrong. And before you, you'll see looking at one of the magical creatures I mentioned called a hippogriff. What is a hippogriff? A hippogriff is a magical creature that is half horse, half eagle. It's a hind quarter of a horse, and the top half is a giant eagle. And this creature's name is Buckbeak. A lot of us who read Harry Potter love Buckbeak. It's hard to pronounce. Buckbeak was kind of adorable and majestic and very loyal to Harry Potter. So when I saw that McFarlane was making a Buckbeak action figure, and it was labeled as a deluxe action figure, I went online and purchased him. And he turned out to be a massive, massive disappointment, probably even more than Draco Malfoy from 19 or 20 years ago. Why? Because Draco Malfoy, I already knew there's a big chance I didn't like him. I didn't like the character. I didn't like the maker. I didn't like Mattel. So I already knew that I couldn't expect too much from it. But Buckbeak, I loved the character. I loved the creature. I loved Hippogriff. I love uh, Todd McFarlane as toy maker, so I had high expectation. So what is so wrong with Buckbeak? Well, first, let's talk about what's right. Buckbeak is very well painted. It's a good looking action figure. Storm gray feathers transitioning smoothly into the hind end of a horse. It has majestic looking wings. The wings, when you spread them out, measures about 15, maybe 14 inches across, which on paper sound massive. That's cool, you know. It is loaded with articulation. The wings can go up and down, and they click into points. Places. I like ratchet style joints on action figures because they hold their poses. The head rotate, and uh, they don't really nod up and down or go left and right. Uh, the eagle claw in the front, the arms swivel forward and back. The uh, elbow, wrist, they all bend, really cool. Can get him into some cool attacking poses with these. The tail go up and down, left and right. The hind leg kick back, kick forward, kick back, kick forward. Okay, so it's well painted. It has a very respectable wingspan when you spread his wing. Uh, it has pretty good amount of articulation, definitely good enough for my liking. I don't need my magical creature to be ultra articulated because I just need him to fly and look intimidating. I don't need him to pull off Spider-Man poses. So what's wrong with it? Why is Buckbeak such a big disappointment? Because Buckbeak is way too small. Right? He looked pretty okay on his stand. He comes with this metal stand that is about 6 inches tall, and there's a metal rod that fits inside a hole in his chest like this, so he can look like he's hovering in the air and flying like that. Huh? That's cool. That's cool. But for an action figure that is labeled as deluxe, uh, he's too small. Uh, uh, and for an action figure of a hippogriff that's supposed to fit in with 7-inch Harry Potter action figures, he is way too small. Right? I'll give you guys a context. In the story, uh, Buckbeak was sentenced to death. Actually, was sentenced to death when he attacked Draco Malfoy after Draco Malfoy taunted him. And we were always led to believe that Buckbeak, like most hippogriffs, is a half horse, half giant eagle. It's a majestic and proud and mighty creature. And so we are expecting a majestic and proud and mighty creature, but let me give you a quick size comparison. Maybe you guys can see this. Here is Draco Malfoy held up against Buckbeak. As you can see, Buckbeak's body is basically the same size as this child wizard, that's Draco Malfoy. Uh, if we take Buckbeak off his stand, and if we discount the wings, I don't know if I can unplug the wings. No, if they're not going to come off. But okay, let me bring the wings up like this, and we do a quick size comparison, side to side, with Draco Malfoy. You see that without his wings, Buckbeak is only the size of a dog, like a large dog, like a German Shepherd, but it's only the size of a dog. Okay, that's a no-no. That's really, really a no-no. I don't know what happened there. I don't know what Todd McFarlane was thinking. When you make a magical creature that is mighty and proud and have the hindquarter of a horse, it's not supposed to be the size of a dog. It's supposed to be at least the size of a small horse. So I ended up with this good looking hippogriff that is more sized to go with maybe 2 inch, 3 inch action figures. I ended up with a hippogriff that I don't know what to do with. My original thought was, okay, if he's a deluxe figure, he would be big, and he's a hippogriff, he would be big. So even if he turned out to be not too good, I can at least have him in the background with my other fantasy figures as a magical uh, companion or familiar or a mount for some warrior to ride. But when he's only the size of a dog like this, there's nothing I can do with him. Uh, he doesn't look right displayed with anyone else. He doesn't even look right displayed with Harry Potter action figures. So both times I've dipped into the Harry Potter action figure collection, both times from different company, and both times they turned out to be majorly disappointing. What's more disappointing in the case of Todd McFarlane is that Todd McFarlane only made 5 or maybe 6 action figures from Harry Potter, and then nothing else came out. Maybe because no one else wanted to buy them because uh, he made such a bad decision on Buckbeak the Hippogriff being too small to display with anything. Maybe there were other reasons, but suffice to say, uh, it's unlikely that I'll ever come to own a complete Harry Potter action figure set because I'm not that excited. I'm not excited about the characters themselves, and both times I tried, I ended up being rather disappointed in these action figures. There was another attempt at Harry Potter a few years ago by NECA, and those action figures are supposedly very nice looking, but they were pre-posed and had poor articulation. And at the time when they came out, I didn't have money to buy them, so now if I want them, I have to hunt them down on the secondary market, which means I would have to pay hundreds of dollars for a figure that would only cost $20 back then, which I'm not willing to do. So for now, I have Draco Malfoy, the young, not very nice uh, child wizard, and I have Bucky, or Buckbeak, Bucky. I was thinking about Captain America, uh, and we have Buckbeak. Now, if you display them like this, with Buckbeak hovering overhead, they actually don't look too bad. Yeah, they don't look too bad. So I have these two. I actually have the chief villain, Lord Voldemort, somewhere in an unopened box. I have a lot of boxes of action figures that I have not opened yet. So we'll get to him sometime whenever I open the right box and Lord Voldemort come out. Thank you for checking out today's Toy Thursday. We'll be back again tomorrow for Fitness Friday with Johnny, Tiger, and Kitten.